Good morning. It's Loren Lockman from the Tanglewood Wellness Center in Costa Rica. I've been asked this morning an interesting question. If we store toxins in body fat, which is primarily where they get stored in the body, is it true that someone who's overweight or obese is more toxic than someone who is leaner? And the answer, I'm pretty sure, is no. Because, well, think about it this way. We store money in bank accounts. So does that mean someone who has more bank accounts has more money? No. I mean, you could have 20 bank accounts that all contain $2, or you could have one bank account that contains $3 million. Okay? So having more bank accounts doesn't mean you have more money stored there. Having more body fat doesn't mean you have more toxins stored there. It means you probably have the capacity to store more toxins, but you don't necessarily have more toxins. While many people argue this and don't understand this, I mean, the truth is fairly simple. If you consume more calories than you burn, you will store the excess as fat. So you can get fat eating the highest quality fruit in the world. Okay? You can get fat eating watermelon. It would be hard to do because it has a lot of volume with all that water. You know, it'd be hard to eat that many watermelons, but you could theoretically get fat if you ate enough watermelon. You could therefore be, you could be obese having eaten nothing but fruit and have your body be clean. So the presence of fat does not necessarily mean that there's toxins stored there. Okay, we don't create fat just to store toxins. Having said that, I believe there are many instances where we have trouble eliminating fat because the body doesn't feel capable of out-processing the toxins that are stored there. So it's going to hold on to the fat if it doesn't feel like it can deal with the elimination of those toxins. So most of you can probably think of one or two people you know. There's a couple of famous raw foodists who have been obese for years. I'm not mentioning any names, we're recording right now, but you probably know some of the folks I'm talking about. How is it possible for someone to stay obese if they're really eating a clean raw food diet? Well, maybe one of the reasons they can't lose weight is because the body's trying to protect itself from all the toxic garbage stored there. And one of these people has actually contacted me many times about coming to fast, but it's never happened. And I've said it would be an amazing thing for you, I guarantee you. I guarantee there's a lot of toxins there, and that's why this fat is so stubborn. Okay? But it's entirely possible for someone who's very, very lean to be very toxic. And I've seen this many, many times. There's no correlation between body size and toxicity. And, unfortunately, many people still believe or have this subconscious connection between fitness and health. You look pretty fit, you must be healthy. We see someone who's fit, we immediately think they're healthy. But is that true? It's clearly not true. Okay? Now, you want to understand that in order to be as healthy as possible, you have to be fit. But to be fit, you don't have to be healthy. You can get fit in an unhealthy body. I've mentioned this before on video. I have a client fasted with me 4 or 5 years ago who had been a nationally ranked tennis player in England. Anybody want to guess what his favorite cuisine was? McDonald's. Exactly. Okay? And a lot of athletes eat crap. And they actually believe, I've had many of them tell me, well, but I work out 3 hours a day, I can eat whatever I want. I actually believe that. Now, they can stay fit and lean, but that doesn't mean they're healthy. Their bodies are storing the toxic garbage because they don't have the chance to get rid of it. And they're not getting rid of it when they're exercising. Exercise is not an effective way to detoxify the body. Yeah, but don't we sweat all that garbage out? What do you think? We sweat primarily for another reason. What is it? To cool down the body, right? Well, homeostasis is not cooling down the body. Homeostasis is bringing the body into balance in general. It's a much bigger picture. We're not sweating for homeostasis. We're sweating to cool down the body primarily. Okay? That's the primary reason we sweat. There are some relatively small amounts of toxins that are carried out of the body in sweat through the skin, but the vast majority of toxins leave the body. They've been broken down by the liver, dumped back into the bloodstream, and filtered out through the kidneys into the urinary tract. That's how we eliminate most of the garbage in the body, is through our urine. Okay? So someone who's sweating a lot isn't necessarily cleaner. In fact, they're probably not. Why not? Because when we're exercising, we're using a lot of energy. But detoxification, cleansing the body, also requires a lot of energy. So if we're using a lot of energy to move the body, we don't have the energy to detoxify at the same time. So I've fasted a number of athletes who were just as toxic, if not more toxic, than the average person. The fact that someone's lean has no bearing on their level of cleanliness. In fact, when someone's exercising and they're burning fat, aren't those toxins being released? Well, they're being released from the fat they were stored in. But what's the body going to do? What's the easiest thing to do? Hold on to it. Put it right back into the body fat. So someone who's very lean is likely, let's look at a theoretical scenario, okay? We have two people, let's say twin brothers, raised in the same household, eating the same food, except one eats way more than the other one, okay? They both engage in the same behaviors. They smoke some pot, they drink some alcohol as adolescents and teenagers. They go on, they're not eating as optimally as possible. They're breathing the same fumes in the same town, in the same house, all the same pollutants in the house. Everything's the same, except that one of them weighs 250 pounds and one of them weighs 150 pounds. Well, which one's more toxic than the other one? Well, the leaner one might be a little bit less toxic only because without having the burden of all of the excess weight, the body might have a little bit more energy to detoxify. Maybe, okay? But other than that, they've been exposed to the exact same amount of stuff. What's true is that the toxins in the leaner brother would be more concentrated in the fat than the toxins in the heavier one. Does that make sense? Okay, I can almost guarantee you that's what's going on. So it's absolutely not true that someone who's heavier is necessarily more toxic. They might be, and it might be that's why they're so heavy, because they can't burn the fat until they give their body a chance to really detoxify. But it could also be that it has nothing to do with toxicity. Okay? Question?
Yeah, in terms of detoxifying the body, I know that there are many people who...
So if someone is fasting and feeding and rebuilding, can they still cleanse if they're rebuilding and that stuff is now more deeply in the body, as opposed to someone who is fasting and eating and then getting leaner and leaner? Is it easier to detoxify if we're leaner and leaner? The answer is no.
Would you have to get completely
No.
broken down and anorexic to be completely clean?
Absolutely not. There's no reason to ever get anorexic, which is an emotional condition, not a physical condition, to get clean. Absolutely not necessary to do that. If you fast, if you want to get it all done at one time, then the answer is yes, you probably would need to do that, because you would need to fast until your reserves were gone to clean out as much of the garbage as possible. Okay, and that doesn't mean you get it all out, because we never eliminate all the body fat. So we can't eliminate all the toxins at any one time. And I've never seen anybody, regardless of how long the fast was, including fasts of 8, 10, even 18 weeks, completely cleanse or heal their body in one fast. Okay? I don't think it's likely to happen. But if you wanted to get as much done as possible, then you'd want to fast as long as you could. Is that advisable for everyone? Not necessarily. Why not? Because there's a cost to the body. If you get very, very, very lean, we talked about Megan yesterday, who ended her fast at 83 pounds, subsequently went down to 72 pounds as a result of all the elimination, and took months to fully regain her strength. On that next break, after that session, when Megan and I took off for a few days to go to Las Lajas to body surf, she wasn't capable. She was a very strong woman, was very fit when she arrived, and had always been strong and fit, and she would body surf with me. I taught her how to body surf. She'd ride the big waves with me. She wasn't capable of handling the current anymore. She was too weak to do it. It took her months to regain her strength. So it doesn't make sense for everyone to do that. It made sense in her case because she was so sick for so long, so constipated for so long, she wanted to get that stuff out of her body. And she accomplished it, okay, by a very long fast and a very long recovery. But it wouldn't necessarily make sense for everyone. It would just depend on the situation, whether, the cost-benefit analysis, does this make sense in a particular case? Most people do not need to get to the point where they're completely emaciated to see amazing benefits. And then they refeed and they rebuild a bit, and a year or 2 years later they come and they fast again. And they can continue, if they've made excellent choices in between. In fact, they've been cleansing all along, because the body doesn't stop cleansing when you start eating. It's always cleansing. In every single moment of your life, it has to, because every single cell is creating waste. And if we didn't clean it out, you would eventually suffocate in your own cell poop. Okay? So your body has to be cleansing itself all the time. What's true for most people is that every single day, week, month, and year, they become a little bit more toxic because they're taking toxic garbage into the body faster than they can eliminate it. So they're not staying up with the job. They're not getting ahead. They're getting a little bit further behind all the time. Fasting allows us to get way ahead, right? To not only clean out the garbage from the last 3 months in Mexico, but from the last 30 years of your life, if it's been stored all that long. So we literally see people eliminating stuff that's been there for 20 years or more, stuff we know has been there for that long. So a lot can happen over the course of a 3 to 6 week fast. The specifics, this is a general question. Someone said to me yesterday in a comment, well, how long do you think I should fast for? And they'd sent me no information about their personal situation. I don't know what their health history has been. I don't know how tall they are, how much they weigh. My response was, I don't have enough information to answer your question. Fill out a registration form and I can get back to you and tell you what I think would be appropriate for you, but every situation's different. Okay? But generally speaking, longer is better in terms of cleansing the body, but there's also a cost involved. So it may not actually make sense for each of you to go as long as you could. Virtually everybody here could fast for at least 6 weeks, and maybe longer. Right? We saw somebody recently who came in very thin, fast for 7.5 weeks. And I've seen that many times before. So can it be done? Absolutely. Does it always make sense? I don't think it does. I think we have to look at each situation and decide, in this case, given what you're dealing with, is it worth doing that? It may make sense for you. It may not make sense for you. Depends on the specific case. Okay? Any other questions about that? Yeah, okay. When I say what you're dealing with, I mean with the underlying conditions in your body. So you're always dealing with something, even if it's just atmospheric pressure and the presence or lack of oxygen and water in your body. I mean, we're dealing with the conditions all around us all the time. Most of us are dealing with conditions that are less than optimal because, remind me how old you are, Weeby? 19? At 37, and I think it's fair to say 37 years of less than optimal choices. Your body is almost certainly dealing with an accumulated load of some toxic stuff. Okay? So those are the conditions. You may have no symptoms whatsoever, but the conditions your body's dealing with are those conditions. How is it doing what it needs to do, given the fact that for 37 years your diet's been less than optimal? And maybe not just your diet. It's important to remember, it's not just diet that's important. It's how we're meeting all of our body's needs, right? Because the highest level of health is the inevitable result of meeting all of the body's needs as well as we can. And the inevitable result of not meeting all the body's needs as well as we can is much less than optimal health. The worse we're doing with regard to all of those needs together, the lower our level of health is likely to be. Obviously, there are genetic factors as well, but if we took two people starting with the same genetic inheritance, again, go back to those identical twins whose genes are theoretically very, 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 very similar, if not identical, we're going to see different outcomes depending on the choices they make. Right? So those are the conditions I'm talking about.